I'm E. I have been a book editor and publisher for 15 years. I have been a relatively serious writer for about 20. My first published work came out this past year in January. Welcome to the channel. This week I'm actually going to be starting by talking about why perfectionism is a death knell for authors. Perfectionism is horrible for creatives in general, but for authors it means you're never going to get anywhere. You won't finish anything. How do we define perfection in art? It's not entirely possible, because perfection is kind of a subjective thing when you're talking about artwork. Is it perfect in the most technical sense? Does it make you feel something? Does it achieve a specific goal? What does perfection even look like? It's not a metric that's going to be the same for everybody, because everyone appreciates art differently. A book that feels perfect to me, that really hits home, and speaks to me in a way that nothing else does, is going to look very different for me than it will be for my husband. And we have the same tastes in literature and media, but it'll still be different for both of us. Perfection is an unachievable metric because it is so deeply personal. If we start talking about technical perfection, I guess it's sort of achievable, depending on which style guide you use. Technical perfection is only achievable if you have a measurable, repeatable, definable end state, and that perfection is going to look different depending on what style guide you use and which person you talk to using it. Because as a professional editor, APA, MLA, Turabian, all the different style guides have different requirements for certain punctuation, whether or not you use an Oxford comma, how you use hyphens, how you use em dashes, whether or not you put spaces on either side of them, how you format ellipses. All of these are going to be different depending on which style guide you use. So even then, technical perfection, not entirely achievable. It's going to be very difficult at the very least. This is Monster. She's probably going to be in my videos a lot because she's a pain. And she likes to think that whenever Mama's doing something, she needs to be involved. Usually that involvement is very loud. At any rate, technical perfection also doesn't mean perfection in the most effective sense. For example, I've read things that are technically perfect and would put me to sleep in 3 seconds flat. Most scientific papers, if they're technically perfect, that's great, but it isn't necessarily written in a way that engages me. Not to say they're worthless, but is it art? No, it's just a dissemination of information. When we're talking about fiction, on the other hand, it's going to be a lot less functional. Perfect is the enemy of good. And good is the metric we should all be shooting for when it comes to producing art that affects people or that sells. First drafts are always a disaster. Hemingway famously said that you write drunk and edit sober. Somebody who gave that advice is not expecting perfection of himself on the first draft. He might not even be expecting good, because if you talked to a drunk person, they're not usually particularly loquacious or eloquent, and sometimes they have interesting ideas, but they're not usually good ones, if we're honest with ourselves. So first drafts are never meant for public consumption. They are meant for you to tell the story to yourself, first and foremost. It's you taking all the Legos and dumping them on the floor in order to be able to build your spaceship, I guess. You're creating a space and coming up with all the tools and pieces you need to create a finished product. There are people out there who will argue that, well, no, in fact, that should be the outline phases, getting all the Legos in order. Yeah, okay, I could hear that. At the same time, the first draft is still that part of that phase. The first draft is still part of the phase where you are conceptualizing what you want to write. Because I know a lot of authors, and I don't know a single one of them where the end product matches exactly the outline they've created. And nor does the end product resemble the first draft. There might be a lot of the same pieces, but it always ends up looking more polished, more finished. Scenes are different, characters speak differently, genders of characters may change. All sort of elements are different in the finished draft than they are in the first draft or the second draft. All of this points to the fact that if you're trying to get the first draft perfect while you're writing it, all you're going to do is stall out. You're not actually going to get anything done. And I'm speaking to you, the author who spends days, weeks, months rewriting the same paragraph over and over again out of this anxiety that it's not perfect. It doesn't need to be perfect, particularly the first time. It needs to be finished. Finished is superior to perfect, because perfect you're not going to achieve, finished you can do. That's why my high school novel of 20,000 words that I was so very proud of and not a paragraph break to be seen anywhere, it is categorically horrendous, I keep it. Because that right there, that novel, is superior to any unfinished idea I will ever have. Because I wrote it. It's finished, technically. I am also a violin teacher. I have taught beginning violin students. They sound horrible. Just absolutely awful. If you've ever heard beginning violin, you will know what I'm talking about. It's impossible to expect somebody to pick up an instrument for the first time and sound even halfway decent. Whether they're playing guitar, drums, flute, oboe, saxophone, it doesn't matter. The first time you pick up an instrument, it's going to make horrible noises. And for some people, that's all they'll ever make, because they hear those horrible noises, think, well, this isn't for me, and put it down, and never pick it up again. Authors who write a couple sentences, a chapter or something, say, wow, this isn't perfect, put it down, we'll never pick it up again. They will never be successful. A first-time violinist picking up an instrument is not going to be playing Vivaldi. They're not going to be Itzhak Perlman, no matter how much they wish they were. It's not realistic. A child learning to walk, when they first stand up, they're going to be wibbly-wobbly all over the place, and they will be like that for a while. We all went through that. Well, okay, not to be ableist here. Some people didn't and won't, and I'm sorry if that offended you. But children will typically go through the experience of learning to walk, or learning to speak, or learning any new skill. Children learn new skills all the time, and typically they're awful at them. How many parents have had their child come home with a macaroni artwork that didn't really look like anything, and you ask them what it is, and it's a horse? Sure, we'll go with that, but that doesn't mean it's not valuable. That doesn't mean it might not be growing into something or teaching valuable lessons. No. And you should be proud of something you finished. Just as proud as you were bringing home that macaroni horse, a finished first draft should feel like that. The macaroni horse doesn't need to be any good. It just needs to be done. And it's worth going on that journey and having that experience to finish it. That's all it really needs. The first draft's entire responsibility is to get finished. After that, you can start dealing with editing and creating a better, more cohesive story, fixing your grammar, and so on. In my novel that I recently wrote, I'm working on book 3 of my series, while book 2 is getting ready to come out probably in January. Book 3, I wrote it in a place with no internet, and I was writing it in software where I had spell check turned off, because, frankly, I got very tired of it trying to autocorrect all of my fantasy names, and I got very annoyed with it, so I turned it off. When it came back on, it turned out I had misspelled the word satellite every time I'd written it, and I've been doing this for 20 years. Humans are going to make mistakes. If I got upset with myself about the fact that I misspelled satellite so many times, it wouldn't be productive. It's also easy to fix. If I was ready to throw the whole manuscript out because I'd misspelled the word satellite, or the fact that I have some plot holes I really need to fix, or various other parts that I need to research, like there are entire sections of that book where I put in brackets, research thing and put in explanation here. And I have to go back and do that. It's okay if your first draft looks like that, because it's just me telling myself the story. After that, I'm going to go in and buff it and clean it up. A finished first draft is going to be inherently superior to any unfinished work in your head. What you write is never going to be perfect the first time with what you have in your brain. What you write is not going to be perfect the first time. Almost nothing in life ever is. However, it can be good. If you're cooking a recipe, chances are it's not going to be technically perfect, but it might be delicious just the same. And that's what we're trying to produce. Creating art is also never a waste of time. Even if you're writing something that never sees the light of day, that nobody else is going to read, ever, it's still a productive use of your time because you're learning skills, you're expressing yourself, you're enjoying the experience, and even if it's not something that's publishable, it's worth doing. We have this mentality in our culture where anything that you can't put on sale is worthless. That is absolute nonsense. Some of the most valuable things to me are things that I would not buy at a store because they aren't made very well. But they matter so much to me. Above my desk is a drawing that a friend of mine made in middle school. It is A pretty decent drawing, all things considered. She's a phenomenal artist and has been for a very long time. However, it's not technically that great. It's got a bunch of errors, it's all folded, the edges are torn, because I've had it since middle school. But it's on my wall because it reminds me of something that really matters to me. I've kept that. My friend drew it for me for my birthday. And no, I would never buy a print of it online, but it's really valuable to me. And she's gone on to be a phenomenal artist, so I have one of her early pieces on my wall, in a place of honor. There's nothing wrong with that. It's imperfect, but imperfect doesn't mean it doesn't mean something to somebody. Imperfection isn't a deal breaker. It shouldn't be. Any more than we expect perfection of ourselves all the time. We shouldn't. A lot of us do, but we shouldn't. Because we're humans. We're incapable of achieving that. The only thing that can achieve perfection is a computer. And even then, how many times have computers screwed up? In the end, the thing I would like you to let go of is the idea that you need to achieve perfection at all. You need to make your books finished. First off, write them. Write the garbage, write the cringe, lean into the fact that you know it's going to be awful the first time. Just do it, it's okay. Once you're done with that, then you can move forward into crafting the piece and fixing the edges. But in order to do that, you need to have something to fix. You can't edit a blank page, nor can you publish one. Instead of expecting yourself to be perfect, you should shoot for good. And if you can't shoot for good, shoot for finished.